Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
Hello and welcome to the Persistence Payoff Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Schaefer. How often have you been in a situation where people are discussing someone else's success and one of the people there will say, I also had a great idea, but I just never pursued it. Or I used to love writing or painting or sports, and I gave up because other things happened in life. That conversation is at the heart of every conversation on this show. The question is, what would happen if you did take that step? If you did write that next chapter? It's possible to do it at any stage in life and to make your dreams into a reality. Our guest today, Zachary Hagan, has great experience with this. He's literally created a world page by page. He's the author of a 5-book series, and his 6th book, Aisha'S Secret, has just come out. He's also an editor and a teacher, and he has a great journey with persistence. So I'm really looking forward to talking with him and learning from his journey. So please help me welcome Zachary Hagan to the show today.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Zachary. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. First of all, I want to say congratulations on publishing your 6th book. I think it just came out. Is that correct?
It actually came out in February, but I'm now just starting kind of the promotion of it. Got a little bit of a late start with that due to some background stuff going on, but I'm excited about it. It's my first fairy tale retelling, and I plan to do a few of these in addition to some other projects.
All right, fantastic. And my understanding is you started being really entranced by storytelling as a young boy. And I would love for you to start by just talking to us about how did your journey as a writer begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my journey as a writer kind of as a small kid. Initially, I would staple pieces of paper together and write little stories and draw pictures in there because I just loved books and I loved stories. So I spent a lot of time doing that. My parents actually kept several of those, and I think still have them. Either that or I have them somewhere in my home. But that was sort of my first iteration as a writer, was kind of playing around with it. And writing a book continued to be something that I wanted to do through my teen and young adult years until I actually wrote my first book thanks to an unfortunate circumstance. I actually lost my first teaching job, but it gave me the space to write. I didn't have anything else to do, and I didn't have to worry about money because they were still paying out the rest of my contract. And so I had a salary and time. So I wrote my first book.
Wow. Well, congratulations. And that's also a great lesson in persistence, because I'm sure with a heartbreak of losing a job, it would be easy to kind of go in a little hole and give up on your dreams. And so you changed that into an opportunity. And so one question I have is, at any point during that process, did you consider giving up and not pursuing your writing?
I think once I decided to write, it really became something that I had to do. And once the first book was written, I realized, it's not exactly an easy thing to do to write a book, but it was less difficult than I thought it was. And I've kind of perfected my process over the course of um, my 6 novels, and now starting work on my 7th, that it's I'm very much a plotter, so I have an outline first, and then I do little blurbs for each of the chapters, and then I do the back cover copy to summarize the entire story, and then I just write the novel and then edit. So it's very procedural for me, and I think that's what makes it less difficult. It's always a challenge because it's still a big project,
Yes.
but it's worked out well, and I've enjoyed the process and getting to kind of fulfill both of my dreams that I had as a kid.
Well, yes, absolutely. And so your first publications are a 5-book series, a fantasy series. And now your 6th book, as I understand, is not part of a series. Aisha's Secret is a standalone novel. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, sort of. It's not going to be part of a series in that someone would have to read from beginning to end of, book 1, book 2, book 3, but I'm planning sort of a loosely connected collection of fairy tale retellings, which Aladdin was the first, and I told it from the perspective of Aisha, a thief who wishes to be a princess mistakenly and has to maintain the lie of who she now is in order to stay a princess. And she that because someone uses that as a way to blackmail themselves into power.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Now, with a story like that and a retelling of Aladdin, um, is that an idea that you've had for a while, or is that an idea that came to you more recently and you said, I've got to get this down on paper?
It was actually something that I've had for a while. During my first year, really, when I was starting to promote my first book and learning the initial ins and outs of TikTok, kind of during the pandemic and after I'd lost my first job, I was a lot more active on social media then, because I had the time. But I was talking with someone, I believe, on a live from my channel. It may have been in the comment section about an idea for an Aladdin retelling from the princess's perspective, and I took that spark of an idea and ran with it, and it became what it was. And then I started but didn't finish a Master's of Fine Arts of Creative Writing, and wrote the first, I want to say, 5 or 6 chapters as the beginning of my thesis, or as an idea potentially for the thesis. I wrote portions of it for one of the writing classes, and it didn't make sense to leave it on the shelf and not complete it because I liked the idea so much. And so I finished writing it and polished it up, and now it's Aisha's Secret.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, again, congratulations. And so when people read Aisha's Secret, what do you hope they take away from it in terms of the retelling of the story of Aladdin? What do you have, like a few messages that you hope that people take from the book?
I think that the things that stick out to me, especially, are Aladdin's attitude towards honor and dignity, and how respectful he is of Aisha, even when she is desperate and needing help in her experience as a princess, because they still have the romance there. And he's, even in his desire for her, he is still thinking about what's best for her and what's best for the country, and putting her and the needs of the nation above himself, which I think, a lot of people tend to put themselves in a situation and really focus only on what they're experiencing and wanting, but we need more people to be selfless and to understand that love is about that. And the other thing would be the struggle, but ultimate surrender to the truth above holding on to a lie.
Wow, that is very powerful. That's a very, very, very powerful takeaway, both of those. So And when you were writing Aisha's Secret, so you had just come from writing a 5-book series, so you had the chance to really extend some storylines, extend some characters across the books. And was it a different experience to write a book that's more encapsulated in one book, and you don't have that same opportunity to extend some of the storylines?
Yeah, I would say that it was a really great palate cleanser in a way. Because I spent 3-4 years with Elior and his friends in the Eternal Chronicles, and I love those characters. Actually, now that I've been a little bit removed, it was kind of fun. Over the course of this year, I read a few of the books to my kids as a read aloud um, at my school, and it was fun getting to experience them again as kind of someone removed from it for a little bit and revisiting that story. But it was such a labor to get to know those characters so deeply, and it was a lot of exposition in the beginning. And so condensing that into kind of a shorter form for Aisha was really refreshing because I didn't have to think about the arc of a 5-book series to get people to know her really deeply. It was okay to keep things in comparison to Elior and his friends pretty surface level, where they knew about her life to the extent that it was relevant to the story, rather than making a bunch of detours into what's relevant for 5 different stories.
Yes, that makes really good sense. And you mentioned earlier that you had some challenges with not necessarily writing Aisha's Secret, but with the release of it. And can you tell us a little bit about what some of those challenges were and how you persisted through them?
Yeah, absolutely. So while during the final editing phase of Aisha's Secret, back in November, I was getting it ready for release, finished all the stuff that was ready for it because I typically have that done 3 to 4 months in advance of the release. And I had a car accident in November of last year, which turned out to be really a good thing for me. Not that I'll go and tell the opposing party's insurance that because they'll want their money back. But I had some pain in my hand after that, and I thought it was just a sprain, so I left it alone for several weeks. And it wasn't until the end of January that I went to an orthopedic doctor to try to get it checked out, and they ended up finding bone lesions. Got an MRI, and we determined that I needed surgery. They weren't sure exactly what it was, and they brought up the C word, so there was a possibility of it being cancer. And when I heard that, kind of everything that I could paused. Aisha's Secret was still slated to release in February, and I'd already started that train, so I couldn't stop that. But I stepped back from most other things to go through that kind of process while still preparing for my 7th book. And so my social media stopped, my media appearances stopped. I simplified my teaching as much as I could, and just dealt with the health aspects, and ended up getting surgery at the end of March. So it was about a 2.5-month process from start to finish before I was able to get the mass removed, which thank God turned out to just be a bone cyst. But it was locally aggressive, and had I not gotten it taken care of, I actually would have destroyed the entire finger. So I'm grateful to still have 5 fingers on my right hand.
Yes. Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I'm not happy that you had the car accident, but I am very happy that you don't have cancer. So, and it's so interesting in life how sometimes things that can seem like a disaster turn out to have these kind of hidden blessings, and really something good comes out of it that we can't see at that moment. And so during that process, did you ever consider postponing the release of Aisha's Secret, or were you on track, like, I'm going to get this out no matter what, on time?
I wanted it out on time because while I don't have, New York Times best-selling levels of followers and people that are reading my books yet, I have a small but dedicated fan base, and they knew that Aisha's Secret had been scheduled for February. And, those 15, 20 people I wasn't going to disappoint by delaying the release when it was ready. Would it have been ideal for me to be able to promote it and do the things that I wanted to do for the book launch? Absolutely. But, the nice thing about a book is that it's an evergreen sort of piece of merchandise. So it's out, I can promote it now, and it doesn't really matter that it's not at release. Maybe a little
Yes.
for Amazon's algorithms, but realistically, I'm probably looking at ways to go even more independent than having things on Amazon in the next year or so. So
Hmm.
it's okay for that, and I'll build back and work on the momentum and get Aisha's Secret into more hands as I can. And I hope lots of people read it. I think it's arguably an even better introduction to my writing style than even Eternal Chronicles would be.
It's it sounds like a really intriguing book. I'm very intrigued by hearing you talk about it. So I hope that happens also, and I can imagine how that would. Um, so from your experience now as an accomplished author, you've done 6 books and you're working on your 7th. What role has persistence played in you finishing your books? Like, along the way, do you get writer's block? Do you get to the point of just saying, oh my gosh, I'm written myself into a hole that I can't get out of, and there's no point in trying? Or, what have you had to do to really complete each of those books, and continue on with your career?
Yeah, so I would say that the persistence was more in finding the process for me because I'd always wanted to write, and I have several ideas that never made it into full novels, likely or largely because I did not plan well for them. In the writing community, we have the terms plotter or pantser, and plotters tend to out their entire novels, and pantsers write by the seat of their pants. Um, so, and I attempted a lot of times because I hated pre-writing. I hated it so much to be a pantser, but I would always get to the point of I don't know what else to write from here. And so those great ideas turned into a pile of about 5,000 to 7,000 words that didn't go anywhere. So when I decided to finish my first book, Eternity's Well, and at that point I was like, this has at least the potential to be a trilogy. I knew that I had to do something different than what I'd attempted before, because I think I have 4 to 6 different ideas that never became full novels. So I knew that I had to do something different. And so I did all the pre-writing for it. I have somewhere in my piles of notebooks, there is an outline of the initial draft of Eternity's Well. And that was the first time I'd ever plotted out an entire book. And when I finished the plot, I realized, oh, I know where the story is going from beginning to end. And from this, I can see how it continues into the next story and the next. And it made the absolute difference in being able to finish. So I had 4 or 5 attempts at books that didn't go anywhere, and that last attempt turned into a full novel because I persisted in finding something that actually worked for me in the way that my brain functions.
Yes, I love that. And this is such a perfect example of, yeah, just write the next chapter, take the next step, because it's very easy for people, for me, and I think for many people, to get discouraged and say, oh gosh, there's no point in continuing. And that's sometimes you stop just short of when the magic happens, and if you had stopped at any of those earlier points, you would not have the series. So I think that's a really a wonderful example of the importance of keeping on, just keep trying. And things very rarely work out the first time. I suppose that there's a few stories of people who've had great success on their first attempt, but most people, I think, who are successful will say they had to keep at it for quite some time and have many tries. So I'm thank you for sharing that, because I think it's a really an example that hopefully will give other people motivation to keep trying. And now you are also an editor, and so I would love to know what that experience is like for you to be an editor of other people's work rather than being the writer.
I would say that it's different, but it's sort of analogous, because when you're an editor, instead of directly telling the story, you're helping kind of bring someone else's work out of kind of the errors and the little missteps that they're hiding behind. I like it because it's very similar to teaching, where you identify potential and then draw it out and highlight it and build it up. And I remember working with one client on this vampire novel, and it's not usually what I like to read, but she had such interesting ideas, and the relationships between characters were so vibrant, but they were hidden behind like rushed storytelling and some exposition that wasn't fleshed out properly or was too long, and lost the reader. And so working with her, I was able to help her bring out the story that was kind of underneath the rather novice approach to writing, and turned into, I think, a much better story than it could have been had she not done editing. So I'm a big proponent of editing. And for the most part, I edit my own work, but I did a lot of work in the first several books with a developmental editor, and kind of learned where my pitfalls and things that I needed to watch when I went into the editing process are. So now once I finish writing the rough draft, I leave it alone if I can wait that long, for about a month, and then come back and with fresher eyes, because it usually takes me about 6 months to a year to write a book. So by the time I go back to the beginning of a book from waiting a month, it's been, about 7 to 12 months since I've seen that chapter.
I can totally understand the benefit of that. I used to work at the university and help with grant writing, and there was a point where when you read something 9 times, you just don't see the words in front of you anymore. And I think I can see the benefit of having that break of like, set it aside and come back to the book and then read it again. And I can totally get that. One thing I was wondering about is, when you're editing other people's work, do you ever have the temptation to make it your own a little bit and say, "Ooh, I'm not sure that this is such a great angle. If only they did this, or I would do it this way." And how do you kind of control that impulse, if you have it, within yourself?
I would say that that's not necessarily, at least in my view, an impulse that necessarily needs to be controlled. Because when a writer hires an editor, and I've had this experience too, if you don't like that editor's writing style, you shouldn't hire them, because you should be meshing with the person pretty much entirely, because they're going to have an intimate effect on your work, whether they're writing some of it themselves or not. And I haven't written portions of clients' work, but I have made editing suggestions that align with what I would write and what I would want to read, because in my view, if they're hiring me, then they're hiring me and all of the experience and style that I come with.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about it that way, and it does make sense. I can see it would be a dance. You're dancing together to get the book completed, and so
free to take or reject suggestions, but ultimately I want clients that really do want to work together on a book to improve the story. And And that's what I've done with the editors that I've worked with, and it's what I do with my clients.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, have all of your books been in the fantasy genre?
So far, I don't make any claims that I will always write fantasy or and never venture into another area of interest. I'm fascinated with the idea of writing a sci-fi novel. Um, I don't have any really great ideas for one at the moment, but it's an area that I would not mind writing. I've also considered writing, because a lot of my focus tends to be faith-based. I've considered writing a historical Jewish romance that kind of teaches about how Christ's relationship with the church works, and framing that in the first century, in that area. But that's an idea that's relatively shallow in terms of how I usually develop my ideas. So
Mhm.
I'm open to other genres, but I'm not necessarily running to it at the moment. Right now, my two primary projects are my Cinderella retelling, Chip's Chance, and I'm working on kind of a larger, kind of epic fantasy series that I'm hoping will be more on par with, like The Lord of the Rings or the
Mm,
Inheritance cycle in their scope.
yes. So I would love to hear more about the Cinderella retelling, because it sounds to me like you have the 5-book series, and then there's Aisha's Secret, and the Cinderella retelling is not a series in the sense that it's not a continuation of Aisha's Secret, but it's a series of retelling of others of these stories. And so
Mhm.
I would love any description that you're able to share at this point, of what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chip's Chance, my Cinderella retelling, is kind of the second installment in that collection of fairy tale retellings. And they're loosely connected in that they're all in the same world, and there might be one or two overlapping characters. Um, but totally independent story. No one needs to read Aisha's Secret before they read Chip's Chance. Um, it'll be enhanced a little bit if you do, because you'll recognize a character, but it's not going to ruin your experience of the book if you don't. Um, and Chip's Chance centers around Thomas Dubois. A It's French inspired because I like the French versions of Cinderella, and he works on his family's, goodness, the word fell out of my mind. They work with lumber, and so it's sawmill and lumber yards, and so it is the heir, but his stepmother and brothers are controlling the family interest while his father is in a coma, and um, he ends up earning the nickname Chip because he works so hard that somewhere on his person there's always at least one wood chip. Um, and the country that they're living in, I believe I'm calling it Cambria, but I could be wrong on that because I'm just now finishing the outline, and usually those names settle into my mind a bit better once I actually start writing. So that name might change. The country that they're living in is highly in debt to the surrounding nations, and so the princess has to find a wealthy enough husband to bail them out and kind of start paying back those debts. And she has 1 year to find a wealthy enough husband. And so she runs this competition, and Thomas gets pretty far, but his stepmother's not happy about that because she wants one of her sons to be installed as the new potential king.
Interesting. Well, I love that background of his name Chip. So for whatever it's worth, my 2 cents is I think that's a great name to keep. I think it's a wonderful someone working in a lumber yard to always have a chip on them. I think is a great story. And that's really so when you're working on this collection, do you have in mind a certain number of individual stories that you'd like to retell?
I guess because they're loosely connected, I have less of a hard and fast number of stories I want to tell, and more if have a fairy tale that I really like, I'll find a way to retell it. I've thought about also doing a Little Mermaid retelling,
Mm.
potentially Sleeping Beauty, but I think I'm more interested in coming back to the fairy tales. Either as something relatively quick to write, because I'm still going to write Chip's Chance while formulating all of the pieces of my kind of larger fantasy project, because I'd like to have at least one release a year. But I know that this kind of epic fantasy is going to take me at least 14 to 18 months to write once I get it completely plotted out. Um, because I'm looking at that being a bit more mature rather than like a YA novel. I'm wanting it to be something more geared towards adults. Um, and so by necessity, it'll need to be a little bit lengthier and more substantial because it has to go deeper into the ideas that I want to explore with it.
Yes. And are you able to work on different creative streams at the same time? Like you mentioned, another sort of an epic series that you're interested in writing while you're working on Chip's Chance, or or the next fairy tale retelling. Are you able to work in both of those streams at the same time, or is it better for you to finish one and then switch gears and focus on the other one?
I would say I can departmentalize enough to work on multiple. I haven't done it extensively so far, but that's largely because I haven't really felt the need to. Um, but I guess the first 6 or 7 chapters of Aisha's Secret were written concurrently with um, Eternity's Refuge. Yes. So I wrote a lot of that, the first part of the book, at the same time as I wrote my third novel. So I actually started Aisha's Secret before the last 2 books in my first series. And it kind of stayed where it was until I was kind of had the headspace to come back and work on it. But I'm a full-time teacher. I don't advertise it with a lot of my book kind of appearances and things like that, but I'm also a PhD student working on a curriculum instruction degree. Um, and of course, I still write, and I'm a father and a husband. And so I can do quite a bit. It's just about managing time and putting everything in its proper place. And typically, I'm expecting the fairy tale retellings to be around 50 to 60,000 words, which is a lot shorter than a lot of other fantasy novels. So they're easier to write and easier to make them the smaller chunk while I'm writing something bigger.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah, I would say you're a master prioritizer. Like that's a lot of things to manage and to succeed at all of them. And so when do you do your writing? Do you have a set time? Do you wake up early and do it before breakfast, or how do you structure your writing time?
Um, it varies on really depending on how far along I am in the book. I would say early on, while it's getting started, it's typically I'll schedule chunks of time either when I have a free period at school or um, usually later at night once my son goes to bed is when it's easier to write. And so I'll have 20 minutes to an hour depending on how much I need. Um, and then once I'm closer to the end, the anticipation of finishing the story kind of takes over, and whatever free time exists, I'm using. Um, and it just varies. I'm very adaptable to wherever the resistance is,
Mm.
because people tend to think that motivation and things like that should be the sustained kind of force that propels people through life. And that's not been my experience at all. Motivation wanes and waxes and grows greater the closer you are to finishing. And I'm absolutely 100% guilty of procrastinating until about 2 to 3 months before the deadline for a book, and then writing 60% of it during a month, and then doing the editing. So I've done that. I've also had it paced really well, where it was a nice, easy breezy walk through every self-imposed deadline to writing at a particular pace. So I've had both experiences.
Yeah, I think, there's such a great lesson in what you just said about motivation, and that, we can think that we have to have this great passion at all times to do things. And you're right that it waxes and wanes, and it's the sticking with it that makes things really happen. Before we wrap up, I do have a last question for you, which is, how can people connect with you if they want to find your books, or if they would like to reach out to you directly? What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way would be to go to my website, zacharyhagenwrites.com. All my social media is there. Links to most, if not all, of my books are there. I'll need to double check that. As well as a way to get in contact with me and my publicist are all there. Okay, I'm seeing that I need to go in and update it because it's saying that it's currently a work in progress, and that's finished, so I need to put the link to it there. But yeah, and you can also, I need to make sure that my newsletter is working, because it's been a while since I double checked it. So thank you for putting this up on screen. I can add things to my to-do list now that I'm out of school. And there's also previews to my books in there, as well as a way to message me directly through the form submission in the contact me section. So.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a joy talking with you, and I'm coming away very inspired and really curious to read your books. I think Aisha'S Secret in particular, for me, sounds just really interesting. So congratulations on all of them, and best wishes both with your books coming up and also finishing your PhD and creating your family. So I think those are all fantastic endeavors that you're doing. Do you have any last words that you would like to share with us about persistence?
I would say any progress that you make in a given day is important. I know that a lot of people tend to have this perspective that if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I say if it's worth doing, it's worth doing halfway too. If you don't have the energy to write 1,500 words in a day, can you write 20? And you can apply that to other things too. If I can't finish this painting, can I put 5 brushstrokes on a canvas? If I can't make a whole meal right now, can I pop some popcorn and then cut some of the veggies so that I can cook later, or cook tomorrow? Just anything that you can do that puts progress in place makes it easier for future you to continue that project.
That is very powerful. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I agree with you. I think that's profound. It was a wonderful way to wrap up the show, because that's a great message. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here and sharing your journey. And I wish you the very best in all of your endeavors.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me and asking such great questions.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks. So if you would like to reach me, I would love to hear from you. You can reach me on my website. My website is ringthing.com. I'm the inventor of the Ring Thing, which is a waterproof patented ring holder, and I'm a first-time inventor and entrepreneur. So this is my next chapter, and I'm learning the importance of persistence every day. You can also email me at info@ringthing.com. I would love to hear any thoughts you have about the show, suggestions for guests, any comments that you may have. Please feel free to reach out. We're here every other Tuesday live at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and you can watch the show anytime after on YouTube. Thank you so much. Thank you to our guest, Zachary Hagen. I really appreciate the great conversation, and to our producer, Roland Friedel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next
Thank
time.
you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USA Global TV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.